everyone, welcome to another virtual program brought to you by Pamunkey Regional Library. My name's Ace and I work out at the King and Queen Branch Library, and today we're going to be taking a small farm tour virtually. As you can see behind me, we got a variety of vegetables growing here. This is what many farmers would consider a small scale farm, or a market garden is what they're commonly known as. We mainly specialize in kind of quick growing crops, so they'll mainly 40 to 50 days or less, besides our longer growing crops like tomatoes and cucumbers. And we're just going to walk through kind of what small scale farming is like in today's world. It's come a long ways, even within the past maybe 10 to 20 years. We have a lot of specialized tools that we use, and we also don't use a tractor, so that's pretty unique for farming in today's world. So without using a tractor, what that allows us to do is kind of shrink down the farm a little bit, because when you're using tractors, a lot of it is built to the tire width. So if you look behind me, we mainly grow in 30-inch beds, and that's from here to here is all of our growing space. And then we have about 14 inches for a walkway, and that just allows us to put 2 feet in. So that really allows us to grow a large amount of crops in a small amount of area. And this whole field that you're seeing right now is about 1/6 of an acre, and that's including our caterpillar tunnel behind us that we'll take a look at as well. And one of the reasons that 30 inches is kind of standard in the market garden world is a lot of our tools are based for a 30-inch bed. Also, a nice thing about a 30-inch bed is you can kind of straddle it like this and harvest it and do what you can, or you can even sit like this and reach over and do that. So the 30 inch is just a nice standard width to use throughout the garden. So right here, what we have kind of beside me, just to give you a glimpse, is we got some really nice arugula here. And what we do is plant it really close together, and that does a couple things. It allows us to grow more food in a small amount of area. Another thing it allows is the plants grow so close together that they shade out the weeds. So that's a huge plus, because farming in Virginia, if you've even never kept a garden, you know that weeds are just, sometimes you just think that you're farming weeds. And it's definitely true for this plot of land. We'll also go through some of the techniques that we use to keep the weeds down, and planting really close together is one of the things that we do. So there's some pros and cons that come with farming on a small scale and on a small plot of land. Is one, you can manage the weeds a little bit better. If a bed gets too weeded, one good thing about, because we're growing such short days of maturity crops like arugula, lettuce, radishes, is if a bed gets too weeded, you can just come out and just rip out the whole bed. And replant it, and that gets the weeds, and it just kind of lets you start fresh again. So that's one really good thing. The kind of the con to that is it's really labor intensive, whereas if you had acres and acres of land, you wouldn't really worry about running out of space. You can just keep on planting and planting, and you wouldn't have to rip out a new bed in order to plant again. Okay, so we have a bunch of specialized tools in small scale farming that makes our jobs a lot easier. One thing we're always trying to do when we are farming and cultivating weeds and going about the day is to try to stand up as much as possible. We kind of want to try to keep it under control to where we're not bending over all day long, because we're trying to preserve our bodies so we can grow old and not be hurting too much. A couple things that we do that with weeding tools. This is one of our really nice weeding tools. It's called the scuffle hoe, and pretty much we're just going in and just keeping a straight back and cutting the weeds at the soil line. This is a really awesome tool, scuffle hoe. Another thing that we do to cultivate beds. So that cultivation is pretty much just disturbing the soil when weeds are at a very small stage. Is this tine weeder, and this come over here. You're pretty much just running. This is really nice. It's a little tricky because it has to be the perfect size bed, but you're pretty much just running this over the top of the bed and disturbing the soil without disturbing the plants. And this is a really nice bed tool because this other weeding tool, cultivating tool, is called a tine weeder. And because we plant, this is a good example of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows in a single 30-inch bed. This it comes in different sizes, and you run it over in between the rows with keeping a straight back. And what that's doing is just disturbing these little thread stage weeds and allowing them to just dry out in the sun on top of the soil. So it's important to stay on top of weeds because as soon as they get about this age, you can't use these weeding tools, and then that's when you have to go in and do the hand weeding, which we try to avoid at all costs. Another thing we do to keep weeds down is use landscape fabric, and this is really nice woven landscape fabric. And what this does is allows us to plant in between the holes, and you can have a good example of it right here. We plant lettuce in the landscape fabric, and it just allows the weeds not to grow in between it. And we can use this up to like 5 to 10 years. So we are continually reusing it. And to burn holes in these, we have a nice little template that we use. And this is our lettuce template. So we just drill holes into this and put that onto the landscape fabric and burn it. And that makes a nice, perfect hole that we can then plant into. A really important tool on our farm is our seeders. So this is our really nice seeder. And the difference between these seeders is this is an Earthway and this is a Jang seeder. I've heard these compared to, this is like a BMX bike and this is more like your nice, really road bike. So this is kind of a really good one to start out with. And if you have like a small home garden, this is really nice. And what it does is just creates a hole pretty much, and then it's covering it with the chain. So it's dropping the seeds, or it's creating the hole, dropping the seeds, and then covering it with the chain. And then it has little plates that you use for different types of seeds and different spacings, and then that's how we get a nice even rows as we go along. It would pretty much be impossible to hand plant something like this. So our #1 seeder is our Jang seeder, and this singulates seed down to a ½ inch. So all of our arugula, mustards, kales, baby kales and stuff are all planted with the Jang, and this hopper comes off, and it's pretty much the same principle as the Earthway. It's just a little more sturdy, and it's got a nice hopper with a lid on it so you can plant during the rain. And then they have little rollers here and these rollers come in different sizes. So that goes into there, and then that's what will singulate your seed as it feeds into this tube and then through the bottom. Okay, so a big part of our job also is to harvest everything. So this thing is one of the most awesome tools out there, because we're mainly electric powered, and what we're using is drills for a couple of our machines, and that's really nice because you can just change out the battery and have a couple charging and just keep on going about the day. A nice thing about electric powered tools is they're not as heavy as gas powered tools. So this is called the quick cut greens harvester, and it's powered when you hit the trigger. It spins these ropes, and it also has a blade right here that oscillates that way, and it just slices the greens and throws it into the basket behind. And I'll do a quick demonstration. So harvesting this by hand, this whole 50-foot bed could take upwards of like 40 minutes. With this quick cut greens harvester, it takes less than 5 minutes. So normally you would be harvesting like this with a knife and cutting it and going row by row. With this thing, you can just come up and you can see just in that short amount of time the amount of grains that I just harvested. And we're looking from a 50-foot bed of arugula anywhere from 10 to 40 pounds, depending on the weather, the bed, a whole lot of conditions with Mother Nature. So this is an awesome tool to have in the tool belt for small-scale farmers. One of our other battery-powered tools is called the tilther. So we are a low-till farm. So what this tilther does is, instead of disturbing like a traditional tiller, maybe like close to a foot below the top of the soil, this just does a couple inches. So this is pretty much just mixing in our amendments and compost on top of the bed, getting it prepared for a new planting of a bed. And this is powered by a drill, just like our quick cut greens harvester. So the drill just goes on here. Tighten it, and then there's this rope that attaches around the trigger of the drill, and which goes up here, and then you just pull on this rope to activate the drill, which spins these tines, and then that's what we use to create a new bed and mix in all of our compost and amendments and all that good stuff. Just like that. Filter, and this is another awesome tool invented by Elliot Coleman, another awesome market gardener. Another weeding tool that we use, and this is kind of a really nice tool to have as like a homesteader. It's called the Haas wheel hoe. So what it does is, these are similar to the scuffle hoe. These are just two solid blades that we can use to cultivate in between our rows. And this comes with a bunch of different attachments, so you can take these out and put on different things depending on what you're trying to accomplish in the garden. This is pretty much the only thing we personally use it for at the moment, is to cultivate our the middle aisles, and but it comes with a lot of cool stuff, and I'll just run it down it. And then so what this is doing is just chopping the soil at the top level, and just leaving the weeds to lay on the top and dry out. Got that. Another cool tool in our tool belt is what's called the flame weeder. So this is a weeding tool. We can use it for a couple of different things. The main thing we use it for is to, when we're going to seed a new bed, this roller on the back flattens it out, and the front part puts out, it's pretty much a giant flamethrower is the best way to describe it. This is hooked up to a propane tank in here. So once it turns it on, I'll turn it on real quick. And this will burn all of the little weed seeds at the top of the bed when you're about to go planting. Because in order to achieve a weed-free bed, you have to start with the weed-free bed. So this is one way that we do it. I don't know if you can, you might not be able to see the flame, and then we'll run that down the beds. This is called the flame weeder, and it basically just incinerates the cell wall of a plant. And once that's gone, the plant will eventually die. We're not looking at like char a weed. All it takes is like a 1 or 2 seconds of a flame on it, and it'll die like the next day or the day after that. A couple other things. So what we're doing in order to maximize our space is planting in seed trays. We have a couple of different sizes here. The most common one we use is our 200 count. So all this lettuce that you see in the field all starts in seed trays inside under lights, and then they'll germinate, and then we eventually put them outside to harden off, and then they'll get planted in here. And what that allows us to do is they're growing for about a month inside, so that's a month that we don't have to put them in the field. So that just allows us to maximize our space a little bit more, and gives us that 100% germination that we're looking for, and just lets them kind of get a head start above the weeds and all that good stuff. Here's a little bit bigger one that we usually use for kales and sometimes tomatoes, is our 120 count. So it's just a little bigger seed cell, as you can maybe see between these two. And then our biggest one that we use is our 72 cell count. And we use this for peppers and eggplants and some of our longer growing vegetables. One amendment that we use is our organic chicken fertilizer. It's pelletized. So when we're turning over beds, we're adding amendments and compost. And what this is pretty much just pelleted chicken manure. Just comes in form like this. And that adds the nitrogen that we need for quick growing greens. And it's basically just a general fertilizer that puts in kind of some nutrients, adds it back. Because we're flipping over beds so often, you really need to focus on the soil in order to achieve a really good crop. Okay, so here we are at our caterpillar tunnel, and caterpillar tunnels allows us to grow under cover for relatively cheaply. This is kind of one of the cheapest ways to get to growing under cover. And as you can see, it's covered by plastic. So what that allows is doesn't allow water to get onto the crops, or for the water to hit the soil and splash up onto the plants. And what that does, if soil is continually splashing up onto the plants and leaves, it just promotes diseases and illness and different things that are kind of harmful for the plant. So everything grown in a caterpillar tunnel just seems to grow better and faster. And also what it allows us to do is grow longer in the shoulder season, so we can start earlier in the year, because in the wintertime, this will be covered all the way to the side, so it'll be enclosed. So that helps keep the warm sun in and all that good stuff. So what you can see behind us is we have some cherry tomatoes here and chard growing on our landscape fabric. One thing about when you're growing undercover like this is the space is a little bit more valuable than it is out in the field where you can just kind of get bigger as you go along. So what you do when you have more valuable space is try to maximize it. And one way we maximize it is to grow upwards and sidewards. So as you can see, these are our indeterminate tomatoes. So they'll just keep growing and growing and growing until disease hits them or frost or various different things. And we use what's called a tomahawk to string up these plants. So we have a line running up here, and this just has a hook on it, and it hooks to there. And then we'll twist the tomato around the tomahawk as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually, once it hits the top, what you can do is take it off, and you can make the string longer, which lowers the tomato. And you can kind of see these actually are kind of lowered, and it's called lowering and leaning them. So eventually the tomatoes, maybe at the end of the season, will be 20 feet long, and the beginning will be over here, and it'll just be kind of sideways until it gets maybe over here, and then we'll start growing up. So it's called lowering and leaning, and those are indeterminate tomatoes. So that's just one way to maximize space. And with the indeterminate tomatoes, they are a little bit more labor intensive. So you have to come in and keep them nice and pruned and keep airflow coming through here. And that just helps promote better plants and less disease and all that good stuff, especially in Virginia's hot, humid summers. Okay, so maybe not a well-known tool in our tool belt will be tarps. Tarps are absolutely amazing for getting a nice fresh seed bed without much manual labor. So what it does is just pretty much smothers all of the weeds and maybe even promotes germination, and in which there'll be no sunlight, so the weeds die. Um, so uh, you pretty much just put these on. In the summertime, it can be um, maybe like a month or two, and all the weeds will die. In the wintertime, it can be a little bit longer, maybe 4 or 5, 6 months. Um, but time is pretty much better with tarps. And as you can see, this area right here was tarped for probably about 4 months, and it just left us with this nice, weedless soil to get started on. And if you look over here, we just kind of moved these tarps, and you can kind of see this dying right here. So these were probably moved about 2 weeks ago, and you can already see we're just kind of weeds just dying. And what that also allows is earthworms to come up to the surface of the soil and eat all that dying matter and bring it back into the bottom of the soil. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just walk through some of our crops that we're growing out in the field. So over here we have our determinate tomatoes, and those are just our nice slicing tomatoes, and they're a determinate variety, so they just grow to a certain height, and unlike our indeterminates in our caterpillar tunnel, well, they'll just keep on growing and growing. And then we have our lettuce over here, and then we have our turnips. These are called sweet salad turnips, and they're just a nice white turnip that you can eat raw or roast them. But I love them raw in salads. And then we got some more lettuce. So these are kind of our summer varieties. This is called Cherokee. It's just a really nice head lettuce. And this is called Muir. So those are really nice summer crisps. And then we actually got some magenta mixed in here too as well. So as we keep going this way, we got our curly kale here. And this is just your standard nice curly kale, and we grow it on landscape fabric because it is a longer, one of our longer crops. Then we got some collards here, which grow very similarly to kale. And then we got another lettuce bed here. Some more kale that is that same kale over here, just planted about 2 months later. And then we got some more lettuce. And these are actually radishes just germinating. You can see the rows that the seeder put in. This is spinach. So this is probably our last spinach bed coming up. Because spinach doesn't germinate or grow too well as the heat and humidity start cranking up. And we got another lettuce bed that's been harvested a couple times. And then this is our arugula bed that we'll probably harvest in 2 weeks, about 2 weeks away. This is another arugula bed that's been harvested already, and we might be able to get one more cut out of that. And then we got some radishes here. These are just planted probably 2 weeks ago, so they're still really baby size, but these will probably be ready in about a week and a half to 2 weeks as well. Some more lettuce, arugula, and then our beet bed. Let me see if I can pull out a nice. And so these aren't too far. Okay, so here we have a nice bed of carrots, and we plant them really close together for baby carrots, and I'll just pick one for you. These aren't too far behind. So, carrots. So thanks for joining us on our small farm tour today. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how small-scale farmers that don't use tractor and grow organically kind of go about things. And if you have any questions or comments on what we're doing, feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I'll take a look and try to answer some of them. Thanks for joining along.